Today, on how it's made. Traditional bows. We'll hunt down all the details. Coffee machines. Making them is a job with perks. Mascots. Making one is a team effort. And hammocks. Hang around and we'll tell you how they're made. When some innovative caveman invented the bow and arrow, it was a huge breakthrough. The discovery turned the Homo sapien into an efficient hunter-gatherer. These days, archery has made a comeback in the hunting community, and it's even been reclassified as an Olympic sport. So you could say the caveman's invention is still right on the mark. Today's bows are definitely not primitive devices. Crafted with calculated precision, they make it easier for you to take your best shot, and the caveman would have been very impressed. To make a longbow, a craftsman cuts 6 strips of cherry wood, a little more than ½ centimeter thick, using a bandsaw. Then with a belt sander, he repeatedly thins the wood strips on both sides, tapering the ends a little each time. The tapering gives the wood some flexibility, which the bow will need to launch arrows into the air. With his bandsaw, he now carves a handle from a piece of wood. Next, he brushes super adhesive glue onto fiberglass strips and the tapered strips of cherry wood. He works swiftly because the glue will start to dry in less than an hour. Now he layers the strips. The fiberglass strips buttress the 6 glued wood strips on either end. This process is called lamination. Next, he glues the wood handle to the fiberglass and wood lamination. And he tops it with a piece of masking tape to protect it from scratches and glue smudges during the next steps. Now the laminates get the squeeze. He places them on a curved plywood shape called a bow form. He positions a steel heat strip, a rubber hose, and another plywood form on top of the laminates. He clamps it all together, then inflates the rubber hose with an air compressor. The pressure from the hose combined with the heat from the metal strip mold the wood to the bow shape as the glue sets. 1 hour later, he removes the laminates, nicely pressed and glued into more bow-like curves. Now he draws the bow form onto the newly curved lamination, following a template made of fiberglass. With his bandsaw, he cuts the wood along the lines he's just drawn. He cuts an arrow shelf. That's the notch for the arrow to rest as the archer aims. Then he trims the handle, making it a little wider at the center for comfort. Next, using a coarse-toothed file, he hollows out little grooves in the upper and lower limbs of the bow. They're called string nocks, and the string will loop around them. To strengthen the tips, he glues little pieces of fiberglass and moose horn over them and the freshly filed nocks. He clamps it in a vice grip to set. When it's dry, he files through the horn and fiberglass to bring back the nock groove. He smooths it with sandpaper. Now he glues another piece of wood over the handle to improve the look and feel of it. He clamps it together while the glue dries, and 3 hours later, he sands it. Next, he wraps the handle in a piece of leather and stitches it together with nylon thread called artificial sinew. Many years ago, they used the tendons of an animal for thread. The leather will make the bow easier to grip. With a gel pen, he writes a serial number on the back of the bow, along with the draw weight. This bow will hold about 20 kilograms of pressure in check when it's drawn. This is a Flemish string jig, a wood fixture with posts on it. He loops nylon string around the posts. This is how he measures the string. It's always 4 inches shorter than the bow. He cuts it with a utility knife, then rolls wax onto it to make it easier to work with. He measures some string. Then he twists 16 strands of nylon, 8 black and 8 white, into a braid with loops on the ends. He hooks the string on the nocks, and it's time for target practice. As he bends the bow, energy is stored. He releases it, and the energy propels the pointed projectile. That apple didn't have a chance. Coin-operated coffee machines are a staple in offices and public places. Years ago, these machines were notorious for spewing out brownish water that on a good day tasted like mud. But today, even finicky Java junkies drink machine coffee because the latest machines have mastered the art of making delicious coffee one cup at a time. This office coffee machine actually makes several different types of hot beverages. And if your employer prepays, you don't have to insert any coins. Production begins with a sheet of steel nearly 2 meters long by about half a meter wide. This flat, as it's called, will become the top and side sections of the machine's casing. A computer-guided punch press makes dozens of perforations for ventilation, and for the various fittings the machine will need in order to function. A worker puts another sheet of steel into a press. This press bends the metal into 90-degree angles. This piece will become the bottom of the casing. A worker uses a spot welding machine to assemble what's called the base panel. This will later house a waste chute, overflow sensors, and wires. Another worker coats the casing with an epoxy-based paint powder. This process statically charges the powder and draws it to the metal like a magnet. Excess powder falls into a barrel below. A worker installs a fan that'll vent the steam and heat generated inside the machine. Another worker assembles one of 2 coffee delivery mechanisms, called augers. When the machine's on, they move the ground coffee to the brewer. He installs the augers into what's called the dual hopper. The hopper's 2 sections will hold up to 6 pounds of different coffee blends, such as dark and light roasts. Next, he installs what's called an agitation wheel. This plastic wheel helps move the ground coffee along and prevents it from getting stuck. The worker then aligns plastic couplings on the augers to mate with the ingredient dispenser. The dual hopper attaches to the ingredient dispenser with 1 screw in a pivoting bracket. Workers also connect power wires to the dispenser's motor and to a water inlet valve. Next, they install a heater and temperature sensor inside the 7-liter plastic water tank. This 1100-watt heater keeps the water at 94 degrees Celsius, just below boiling. That's the optimal temperature for extracting flavor from ground coffee beans. After applying stickers warning service technicians to turn off the machine before draining it, a worker installs 3 outlet valves, 1 to dispense hot water for tea, 1 for coffee, and another for hot chocolate. Next come stainless steel rods to monitor the water level inside the tank. They trigger an automatic refill mechanism. The worker connects power wires to the brewer motor. Then she mounts what's called the whipper mixing bowl. This aligns with a chocolate syrup dispenser to prepare the hot chocolate. Next, she installs the brewer motor assembly into the machine's casing. This is the coffee machine's 15-button selection panel. It lets you select what type of hot drink to brew, in what cup size, and when to start. The panel also displays the prices when the coffee's not on the house. Once that's hooked up, workers test the chocolate syrup delivery system. They run water through it to ensure it doesn't leak. They also test to see if the system dispenses the correct dose of syrup. 1 dose is 15 milliliters, a tablespoon. A small cup of hot chocolate requires 2 doses. A large cup requires 4. Now they install the brewer. It works much like a French press coffee maker, brewing a separate batch for each cup. To test it, they run water through it and make sure the selection panel works properly. By testing the panel with the coffee machine closed, they ensure the circuits are properly aligned behind the selection buttons. Depending on how strong you select your coffee, a dispenser releases between 6 and 16 grams of ground coffee into a reusable nylon filter. A piston then forces hot water through the filter for 10 to 20 seconds, depending on the size of cup. This process extracts the flavor of the ground beans. The machine then scrapes away the coffee grinds and throws them down the built-in waste chute. Then it prepares for the next customer and the next delicious cup. Mascots are supposed to bring luck, but the people who wear mascot costumes have had a few lucky breaks themselves in recent years. The outfits are much lighter now, and there's even an exhaust system complete with a tiny fan inside the head, so it's not so stifling in there. That means the mascot doesn't have to sweat it out to drum up a little team spirit. This dinosaur mascot for the Lung Association is part of a new breed. The mascot costume has evolved into something with real creature comforts. To make this dinosaur, they sketch him out. Then the artist modifies the figure to human proportions, targeting a height of 5'10", which means the costume would fit performers 5'8" to 6 feet tall. The artist designs huge eyes and a very extravagant mouth, and not just for creative reasons. The large openings will give the mascot performer room to see and to breathe through screens. Now, a sculptor carves big pieces of lightweight, uncrushable foam. With a utility knife, he shapes the dinosaur's head based on the design pattern. Traditionally, fiberglass has been used for mascot heads, but foam is half the weight. He attaches a battery pack to the inside of the head, at the back of the neck, using Velcro. He tests it to make sure it has enough juice to power this tiny square exhaust fan, which is to be placed inside the head at the top. Then he sprays glue on the foam, sticking the sculpted layers of foam together. Now the dinosaur head is starting to shape up. He cuts out those enormous eye holes. Then tries on the head for size. He checks visibility and ease of movement. Next, the sculptor slices into a very dense piece of foam. It's dense because it will need to hold up to heavy traffic. This is the dinosaur's foot. He scoops out foam in the center of the foot, hollowing out an area. Then he carves out more, following a pattern of a size 12 shoe, so that a human's foot could fit inside this big mascot claw. He rounds the outside of the foam foot with a belt sander. Now the foot is fully sculpted and ready for the fabric department. There, a worker sprays heavy-duty glue onto the outside of the foot and stretches a nylon fleece fabric over it. The fabric has a lot of give, so it can be tightly pulled into the grooves of the foam. Now she sprays adhesive onto the bottom of it and cuts off the excess fabric. She sews the seams with a very tough thread. Then a worker glues a rugged rubber sole onto the bottom of the dinosaur foot. This is a toenail, made of nylon stuffed with polyfill. It takes 3 hours to make a foot. Now it's back to the other end. He glues an eye onto the mascot head. The eye is made of breathable nylon stretched over a plastic frame. Another worker sews on a horn, which is made of fabric-covered foam. Then she stitches on the nostrils. And now the mascot has some expression. But there's one more step. He glues a white nylon screen over the mouth and sticks black fabric strips over it to give the mascot its smile. Now a worker drafts a pattern for the outer body. It will go over an inner bodysuit that will give the mascot its rotund shape. She cuts the liner fabric for the outer body, following the pattern, and then follows the same pattern for the outside fleece. She sews 3 layers, fleece, foam, and liner, all together. This serger machine cuts off excess fabric as it sews and binds the edges. She hand stitches the scales onto the back of the dinosaur mascot. And now it's time to give this mascot suit a test run. It fits like a glove. But what's the view like from the inside of that head? Not too bad. He makes sure he won't lose his head in all the excitement. And this is one dinosaur who's ready for the 21st century. When Christopher Columbus discovered the New World back in the 15th century, he also discovered the hammock. It was in the West Indies that Columbus found natives lounging in what he later described as sleeping nets. And when hammocks were introduced to the Europeans, the net effect was very big. Centuries later, we haven't tired of sleeping nets. Hammocks were once called hammaks because they were woven with fibers from the hammock tree. Today, they're made of braided polyester, a change people accepted, well, lying down. To make a hammock, a worker measures and marks the spots for holes to be drilled in a hardwood spreader bar. He spaces the 22 holes 7 centimeters apart. He rounds the edges of the wooden bar with a shaped cutter called a router, smoothing out any sharp edges that could jab you when you climb into the hammock. Using an electric drill, he makes holes a centimeter in size in the spreader bar. Then, with a countersink, he scoops out the wood around the edges of the holes to make a gentler slope for the polyester rope. He adheres the company's pre-pasted label onto the bar. And next, 16 bobbins turn at a speed that could make you dizzy just watching. They're spinning the polyester cord. The bobbins twist the 16 polyester strands, braiding the strands into a herringbone pattern, while electrical pulleys draw them up. The pulleys drop the cord in a drum. Now, it's all in the wrist action. A weaver deftly intertwines the thick cord into a triangular shape. She's making the hammock's harness. It's called a clew. She tugs each row tightly to a ring at the top to ensure that the weave is steadfast. As she weaves, she drapes the long pieces of cord over a wood frame to keep them from tangling. After the triangle is formed, she checks for errors in the weave. Now she threads the clew cords through the holes in the spreader bar. She snares a cord with a large crochet hook. Using the hook, she threads a cord through the hole at the furthest end of the spreader bar and then knots it. And she does the same on the other end of the bar. While the bar hangs by the 2 cords, she pulls the rest of the clew cords through all 22 holes in the bar. Next, she positions the spreader bar under a guide bar to ensure everything is level. And she knots the rest of the cords tightly onto the underside of the spreader bar. It's a critical step. If there's any slack in the clew, the yarn will stretch and the hammock will be misshapen. This hammock harness is now strong enough to support a 450-pound person. Next, she uses a 3-meter-long cord to make a chain of small links by pulling each link through the previous one. The top of the chain rope hangs from a hook, stabilizing it, and allowing the weaver to quickly turn the simple cord into an intricate-looking chain. Now she hooks each end of the chain onto pins on a loom. She weaves another cord into the chain, threading it through with the crochet hook. She makes one loop in about every 6th link in the chain rope, and she hooks that cord onto the same pin as the chain. There's no rest for the hammock weaver. She takes a shuttle, which is a piece of wood with 200 meters of cord wrapped around it, and pulls it from below, up through the available loops, and then back down, expertly weaving the web that is the hammock bed. She hooks a second chain rope on the loom and threads the edge of the woven bed to this chain. Now she places the spreader bar of a finished harness on one end of the loom. She lines up the pins of the loom with the holes of the bar. She knots the cord on each pin to a cord from the spreader bar. She repeats the process at the other end of the loom, binding the second harness to the hammock bed. She makes one last knot in the chain, and then removes the excess cord with a heat gun. The heat gun makes a clean cut with no ragged edges to unravel. After all, you're the one who's supposed to unwind as the hammock cradles you in its hypnotic sway. If you have any comments about the show, or if you'd like to suggest topics for future shows, drop us a line at www.howitismade.net.